Hi, everybody. I'm Crystal Haynes. Tonight on Greater Boston, we'll take a look at the warning signs that led up to the mass shooting in Lewiston, Maine, the state's yellow flag law, which failed to stop it, and what Massachusetts and the rest of the country can learn from what went wrong. Then a look at Harvard's new $25 million Center for Mindfulness in Public Health. It has been 2 weeks since a gunman murdered 18 people and hurt more than a dozen others in Lewiston, Maine. In that time, we've seen report after report about the warning signs the suspected shooter showed in the months before the attack. In May, police say his family reported concerns about his mental health and access to guns. The U.S. Army, where he served as a reserve officer, had revoked his access to firearms while on duty. And in September, a fellow reservist warned their superior officer, in text obtained by the Boston Globe, that he heard the shooting suspect, quote, threaten the unit and worried he was, quote, going to snap and do a mass shooting. So how did all of these warning signs go unheeded? And what about measures like Maine's yellow flag law, which allows police to temporarily remove guns from people they believe pose a threat to themselves or others? Well, I'm joined by Margaret Groban, a former federal attorney and current adjunct professor at the University of Maine School of Law, and Jack McDevitt, criminology professor at Northeastern University and the former chair of the state's Gun Violence Reduction Task Force. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So, I mean, this has been such a moment, especially for folks in the Northeast as they're touched by the events of what happened. Margaret, I want to start with you because I don't think a lot of folks know the difference between red flag laws, which I'm sure folks have heard about, and a yellow flag law.
Well, thanks for this opportunity because there is a lot of confusion about the difference between a red flag and a yellow flag. And unfortunately, this tragic incident has shown how this law is so deficient. And I hope that our state will move forward now in light of this tragedy and pass a red flag law. In Maine, we are the only state in the country that has a yellow flag law. And I think that we are an outlier rather than a model for what should happen going forward. In a yellow flag law, first, law enforcement must be involved. So that means if a family member or close personal friend is in crisis, they must call law enforcement who responds to the scene, and they have to put that person in protective custody. Although it's not an arrest, it looks a lot like an arrest, and that person will be put in the back of a squad car and taken somewhere where they can get a mental health assessment. And I use the word assessment intentionally because they aren't getting treatment. All they're getting is an assessment from a mental health professional that they are likely to be, there's a likelihood of harm to themselves or others. So first, the police make the determination that there's probable cause to believe they're a danger. Then the mental health professional makes that assessment, and only then do they go to the judge for the judge to then either endorse or not endorse the firearm relinquishment order, and then law enforcement has to go and seize the weapons. So it's a three-step process, and I think it's 2 steps too many.
Jack, would you agree with that assessment? Because I know in Massachusetts, we do have a red flag law, choosing to be more strict in this.
Yeah, I think I agree with Margaret. It is an additional step in Maine. When we were trying to decide, I was chair, as you mentioned, of a task force to change the Massachusetts law. We had a series of hearings, and one hearing was with mental health professionals. We said to them, can you predict who's going to be dangerous? Are you in a place to tell us this person is? And they said, no, we can't predict. So then we turned to the police chiefs and we said, can you predict? And they said they couldn't predict. And we were sort of at wit's end, like, how do we get someone who could say this person's going to be dangerous? And what we came down to was the people who most likely would be impacted and would know that someone's going through a personal crisis would be their family and friends. So what we said in Massachusetts was we're going to empower those people to go in and request the law, like request the firearms be removed. So I think it's more in line with the other laws in the other 20 states that have them in the United States. But it is the case that in Maine, Margaret's right, there's a 2-step process that is cumbersome and time-consuming.
Margaret, I want to ask you, there's a difficulty in removing firearms from someone who already has them, even though this individual here in Maine was involuntarily committed, but he would have had to actually admit that he had guns to have them taken away. Is that correct?
Well, I think, yeah, there is a federal law that provides that if someone is voluntarily committed, they can't possess firearms legally. I think we're still waiting, at least I'm still waiting for confirmation that he was involuntarily committed. And I don't know if that is the case. But even so, if he were, then you don't know that he's a prohibited person. There's no way law enforcement would know that unless they were doing a background check and saw that he was, in the NICS database and he could not have firearms that way. But I think what it speaks to is the deficiency in Maine laws, that someone who is in crisis can go and buy weapons of war with relative ease in Maine. He could hit the AR-10, which I understand is even more lethal weapon than the AR-15 that does incredible damage when it's used. So I think it's our weak gun laws in combination with our burdensome yellow flag law that help contribute, unfortunately, to the mass shooting that occurred here.
I want to point out we actually had John Rosenthal on BPR who spoke, and John Rosenthal from Stop Handgun Violence, as you both probably are aware of that organization, saying that the sale of guns in Maine actually went up after this incident, this mass shooting, and that's a fairly regular occurrence. Jack, I wonder if you could speak to that, because how do we then make sure that these laws continue to make people feel safe if they're going out and buying more guns because they presumably feel unsafe after a mass shooting?
Yeah, John's been a leader in this area for a long, long time, and I really respect his work. And he's right. When we look at laws, when we look at incidents, laws being passed, incidents that occur, the predominant reaction is to go out and buy more guns. I'm going to get my guns either because they're going to prohibit them and I won't be able to have them, or because I need to protect myself. I will say that the one thing that I would ask that we sort of think about in terms of this conversation is part of the problem is we think of taking someone's guns away as something that's a permanent, terrible thing to do. And I think we have to reframe that. And people are always saying, well, when we don't want to take his guns away, he'll get mad or they'll get angry, upset. I said, I think we got to think to ourselves, let's balance the risk versus the reward here. If we take the guns away for a month or two, how much harm is that doing versus somebody who we know to be in crisis and might hurt themselves or hurt others? And I think we err on the side of, well, if it's not clear, let's not do it. I think we should rethink that and think about how do we make this person, his family, and our community as safe as possible.
Margaret, do you think that gun culture and the laws in Maine actually need to change to prevent something like this happening, or gun violence writ large, honestly?
I do. I think that in Maine, we were naive to think that it wouldn't happen here. And those of us involved in the gun safety movement, unfortunately, we're saying it's a matter of when, not if. And now, unfortunately, it has happened within our communities. And we have been tilting at windmills, trying to get some kind of gun safety law. Maine is ranked F by many gun safety groups for the strength of our gun laws, which is basically non-existent. So I think it's a reality check for all of us that the easy access to guns, and we are a source state for guns. It's not just the safety of our community and our state, but the safety of our adjoining states, of where our guns are ending up at crime scenes in other states because of how easy it is to get guns here.
Interesting. Are background checks enough, though? Because oftentimes the first call is like, well, there needs to be better background checks. It seems like there were other signs, however, that were missed in this case, and other warnings that were made before this mass shooting by this shooter's family, by the military branch in which he served. And these things seemed like, as we mentioned in the intro, to go unheeded. Jack, I wonder if you think background checks are enough, or if there needs to be something beyond that.
I think background checks are a help, but I think what we did in Massachusetts was to empower local police chiefs to set a higher standard for their community than just a federally prohibited person, as Margaret has explained. I think that what we said to police chiefs is sometimes people have committed bad things, but they haven't rose to the level of being a federally prohibited person. So what I mean by that is you might have a family where there's been domestic violence, but there's never been a restraining order and there's never been an arrest. But the local police chief knows that they've been to that house 3 or 4 times and there's been violence. That person shouldn't have a gun. And they shouldn't be able to, so in Massachusetts, the police chief can say, I'm not going to give you a license because of your violent history. So I think background checks are important, but we probably have to broaden the definition of what a background check is and what kind of information we'd like to use to make a determination about who's suitable to have a gun.
Margaret, I'll ask you the same question. Are they enough? And what about these signs that seem to have gone unheeded?
Well, to begin with, I don't think they're enough. I think it's part of a system of laws that can all make us safer. I think we need an assault weapon ban. We need background checks. We need a red flag law. And since gun suicide, unfortunately, Mr. Carr did commit suicide at the end of this, which was not unpredictable. But gun suicide is the biggest kind of gun violence we have in Maine. So a waiting period, even as part of that background check, would be really important in the state of Maine. And as far as signs that went unheeded, I think, there's so many facts we still don't know yet. And I think let's wait and see what the commission shows as to what happened here. But I served on the Maine Domestic Violence Homicide Review Panel because around half of our homicides every year are domestic violence related. And we use that opportunity to gather stakeholders and without judgment, look at how processes and procedures and laws can be improved to try and stop as many domestic violence homicides. So in Maine, we are willing to take away firearms at the temporary order stage for domestic violence abusers, but we've not been willing to do that to other categories of persons who pose dangers as well.
And the effect of that community, the effect this has had on that community is so profound, even in the weeks afterward, and will likely be felt beyond that. Isn't that true, Margaret? I mean, you're in Maine.
Oh. Absolutely. I mean, I live near Portland, which is our biggest city, but Lewiston is a 45-minute drive. We were all kind of, if not actually on lockdown, very cautious. We knew he was heavily armed. It was an extremely scary situation. And I would say, Bates College was right there. Those kids were on lockdown. They brought in professors to deliver meals to them in their rooms. I mean, the whole thing was just because it took a couple of days to find him. It was a really frightening situation. And I would say in some ways preventable. So I think we have to sit down now and look at how our policies and procedures are inadequate and hopefully have the legal and political courage going forward to do something to change things.
Excellent. Well, certainly a lot to continue to unpack as we figure out exactly all of the events that led up to this terrible shooting and this tragedy, and that community hoping that they get what they need in order to heal and somehow move on to some sort of normalcy. Jack McDevitt and Margaret Groban, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Up next, mindfulness, or the practice of being fully present in each moment, comes from an ancient Buddhist approach to living and is said to reduce stress, increase self-awareness, and cultivate well-being. It's a teaching Harvard is now investing in big, putting $25 million into the Thich Nhat Hanh Center for Mindfulness in Public Health. The center will house a number of research initiatives looking to assess the impact of mindfulness on health and wellness. Now, after Harvard announced this center, I did speak with its director, Walter Willett, as well as Nisha Deed, the founder and CEO of Pure Spark, an organization focused on Black mental health. Welcome. Thank you so much for your time.
Great to be with you.
So, Dr. Willett, let's start with this center and your connection to this philosophy and why it connects to the work that Harvard is doing.
Yeah. Well, actually, my connection with Thich Nhat Hanh, for whom the center is named, goes back quite a bit in time. When I was in medical school in the 1960s, the Vietnam War was raging, and myself and some other medical students were wondering what's going on here. So we had invited this young Buddhist monk who was in the United States to come and talk to us about what are the origins and the meaning of the Vietnam War. And it turned out it was Thich Nhat Hanh. And he was very informative. We learned a lot from him during that time, and it changed the paths many of us took in our lives. It was only more recently that we connected with a common interest in food and how that can relate to mindfulness, and more recently in the relation between what we eat and planetary health, which is all part of the mindfulness vision of the world.
And Naisha, you know, a lot of folks think mindfulness and maybe they think of like yoga culture. They don't necessarily think of that connection to mental health, the connection to social health, nutrition, and things like that. So talk to me about what that means for you. And the city invested, you know, places like Harvard investing in it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually love to hear that modern medicine is now catching on to these ancient healing practices. As a person who experienced depression and having a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, I never thought something as simple as going outside, getting some fresh air, stepping away from modern day technology would be so helpful in my own wellness, right? And mindfulness and mental health go hand in hand. I mean, they're totally connected. So you talk about yoga, that's something that I practice every day, and it's something that I encourage people, if they're interested and open to it, to practice as well.
And there's more of a buy-in, Dr. Willette, right? Like I see businesses really bringing in that mindfulness piece. You talked about nutrition and the public health sector. It's something that goes hand in hand in terms of productivity and all aspects of our life.
Absolutely. A lot of the focus on mindfulness research until this moment has been mostly about individual health and well-being, and that's very important because if we don't have that, we can't be productive, we can't be happy. That's a beginning, that's a floor. But in this center, we hope to take mindfulness another step into the public health world. And one of the aspects of mindfulness is connectivity, how we ourselves are connected to everything around us, to other people, our environment, ultimately our planetary health as well. So we hope to combine these different levels of mindfulness. And as you say, it's being appreciated across businesses, across many different organizations that are beginning to understand even more and more that they can't be a successful organization, whether it's for making money or doing good in the world, in other ways, unless they have healthy employees, both physically and mentally healthy.
Naisha, in your work, when you go and say you consult with a company or an organization, I mean, how do you make them understand that that connection between mindfulness, wellness, mental health, is it connected to their productivity?
I mean, I think that when we think about mindfulness, sometimes we think about someone seated cross-legged, you know, with their hands in a mudra and, you know, with their eyes closed. And sometimes people think it's a little kooky, right? They don't necessarily see the connection. But I can tell you that when we feel better, right, we think clearer. I don't think a lot of people understand that when you're dealing with, or if you've ever dealt with a mental health concern, as in depression, how it impairs you cognitively, right? I remember dealing with it myself and thinking, am I dealing with Alzheimer's right now? My memory had gone, you know, completely missing, right? I could not think clearly. So these are the things that will get in the way of productivity, right? If we can think clearer, if we can have better memories, then obviously we're going to be able to get the job done better.
And it can also affect the people around you too. Like if there are individuals or if there's a group of folks that aren't working to their best or aren't their best and don't have that mind-body connection, it can affect everything.
Absolutely. I think that it's contagious, right? Just like we think of bad moods being contagious, good moods are contagious as well. And when I take care of myself, I can better take care of my community, whether it be my community at home or my community at work, right? I can come to work with a better attitude. And when you're working around people that have good attitudes, then the sky's the limit, right?
Yeah. It seems like, Dr. Willette, you know, there's a growing number of researchers that are making this argument that mindfulness is better for all cognitive processes, and that's why the research dollars are there.
Absolutely, and there have been about 25,000 publications in this area over the last decade or so, and that's increasing rapidly. So we do hope to contribute to that knowledge. And in our own field of public health, mindfulness connects literally every day with what we do, because in traditional medicine, we're usually talking about one person at a time, but in public health, we are dealing not with just that individual, which is very important, but everything and everybody around that person. And we didn't do so well, for example, during the COVID pandemic with masks and immunizations. And we realized in public health we need to do better. And part of that is conveying the knowledge, the information, and also how to do it with things like wearing a mask. It's not just protecting me from COVID. It's protecting my family. It's protecting the people I work with, the other people in my community. And so it's not just that I get better, but so they can, if they be healthier, go to work, so kids can go back to school. Everything is connected. And I did want to mention this. It comes out of a Buddhist tradition, but it's actually, as Thich Nhat Hanh pointed out, this is embedded in many ancient cultures. Socrates said, no man is an island. We'd say no person is an island today. But he really understood that everything we are, everything we do is connected to others in the environment around us.
What are some of the aspects of mindfulness that you hope to do research on, in this new center?
It's two areas of emphasis will be nutrition. It's actually housed in our Department of Nutrition, but it's meant for the School of Public Health as a whole and the university as a whole, and also environmental health. Those are two areas where we're very active in nutrition, especially being mindful, again, about what we eat, how it was produced, who produced it, what are the effects on me, the consumer, what are the effects of me consuming that food on the environment, and working especially among children and also in the later stages of life.
And Naisha, in our final minutes or so here, when you see investments like this, and I asked you this before, but I also think about when we're talking about nutrition and we're talking about overall wellness, where do you see this field going in terms of benefiting the communities that you serve and other communities as well?
Well, I'm excited with the potential, right? I think that what COVID did was help us to kind of really see all of the disparities, specifically within the Black community when it comes to health equity and health justice. And I think we're just getting started. And I'm really excited about reimagining what health looks like in my community. I see a day where, maybe we can have farmland and we can go to the farms and pick fresh fruits and vegetables for us to eat. We do understand the connection between food, the gut, and the mind and overall well-being. So, being able to attack these things kind of at the root is where we're going to really see some big changes. But it takes time, and I think that we have to be patient, and also it takes imagination as well.
All right. Well, Dr. Willette, Naisha Deed, thank you so much for your time.
A pleasure. Thank you, Crystal.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for tonight, but come back tomorrow. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu will join us on the latest sweep at Masson Cass and the steps her administration is taking to address the crises of homelessness and addiction in the area. That and more tomorrow at 7. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.
My question, Edgar, is those planes that fly by that have the trailing banners, I was wondering, how do they take off and how do they land with those banners?
What better place to answer that question than right here?
This place has been here since 1929, so over 90 years now, and I'm a pilot, I'm a mechanic, so I do all the work here. I mean, I build the engines, we put the airplanes together, we fly them.
How on earth do you learn how to do what you do?
I've been here since I was in diapers, so sort of born into it. I was literally putting together red letter banners, standing on a stool because I wasn't tall enough to reach the straps when I was real little.
Much of Chris's business is flying these iconic banners with 5-foot red letters or enormous pre-printed billboards. And getting them up in the air is not as easy as it might seem.
Everybody thinks, how do you take off with that thing? Well, you couldn't physically take off with it. It's just too big, it'd be too much drag, it wouldn't be safe, it wouldn't work.
So can you just show me how this works?
Yeah, let's go check it out.
Let's do it!
Along for the ride with us, our curiosity seeker Deb, ready to discover firsthand how Chris and his team pull it all off.
The banner is laid out upwind and literally is a 275 or 300 foot rope running to a set of poles. They're about 6-8 feet apart, about 6 feet tall. The end of the rope has a loop in it, and it's just strung across the poles. The airplane has a grapple hook coming from a release in the back that comes to the cockpit. We take off, we deploy the hook.
So that is the banner behind me on the ground. Apparently what's going to happen is a plane is going to come from back here, scoop down to the ground, and hook that up. It's kind of crazy.
The pilot comes around the pattern. We set up for a descent sort of at the poles, and we actually swing this hook through the poles. It grabs it, they climb out, and then about the time the airplane's over the top of the banner, it will just peel the banner off the ground and climb out. It's hard to do, but it's pretty cool to watch.
That's cool. Very cool.
Once the plane is airborne, a quick check to make sure the banner has unfurled correctly, and then it's time to fly.
It's a lot of coastline, a lot of very busy beaches. We might just hit certain beaches or certain sections of the Cape, but we can do anywhere from an hour to 4 hours or even more.
There is still more work to do upon return, though, as landing with a banner attached is just as much of a no-no as taking off with it.
You know, when you see it flying, you'll see the banner hangs below the airplane. So if you ever came in and let the banner beat you to the ground, it's going to pull you out of the sky. That's not good.
So before the wheels hit the grass, the pilot must literally let the banner off the hook.
We come down and we descend over the banner area where we're going to drop, and then over a designated spot, we'll just pull the release, and the banner will just come off, and it will just fall to the ground, and then the airplane comes around, lands just like a normal airplane.
From there, all that's left is for the crew to collect the banner and start prepping the next one to go up. Summer is a lot of things around here, but restful is not one of them.
I'm so glad I asked the question because that was so cool. I've never seen that before. It was really fun to watch. These guys are amazing at what they do.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, and perhaps more importantly, let me know what you are curious about, because as you can see, I might look into it for you. I'm Edgar B. Heroic III. Stay curious out there.
The Curiosity Desk is sponsored by Emerson College.
It's a war